Well, welcome back, folks. Today's video is the first in the series of rebuilding the engine for the Suzuki TS50 project. I'm not sure how many videos this is going to take. It could take 3 or 4, it could take 10 or more. Likely going to be somewhere in between, but I haven't done the work yet, so I really don't know. The other thing I wanted to mention here is that if you're looking for a full how-to tutorial series on how to rebuild an engine, I'm afraid you're going to be disappointed. This is not going to be a complete nuts and bolts video, record, and post every step of rebuilding of this engine. I've done a lot of videos before on rebuilding of engines going back years. All you have to do is go look at my channel and you'll see videos covering all kinds of bikes, both 2-stroke and 4-stroke. What I am going to show here, though, is the major elements and challenging steps that I might have to go through, such as splitting of the cases. I'll probably get into that in some detail, but I'm not going to show every single thing. Let's talk about splitting of the cases. There's two designs, fundamentally there's two designs of engine cases that were used back in the day on these kind of bikes. There's the vertically split, that is the engine cases come together like this, and the seam between them runs vertically. This Suzuki happens to be a vertically split engine. Now the crankshaft would lay like this. You go through the cases and you have a bearing and seals on each side. That's vertically split. You also have a design called horizontally split, which is like a clamshell that opens like this. And the crankshaft would then lie like this. The horizontally split design was used typically on mid-size and larger Japanese engines, both 2- and 4-stroke. Yamaha RD350 used that design, Kawasaki triples used the horizontally split design, etc. The vertically split, which the Suzuki TS50 is, as is most other mid-size and smaller 2-strokes, some 4-strokes, a lot of 2-strokes, single cylinder in particular, they come together like this. So when I talk about vertically split, that's what I'm referring to. And I will talk about that in more detail when we get into the further into this video series. The other thing I wanted to share with you is I'm going to be using this service manual as reference. Now I did talk about this earlier. I got this, I think it was from New Zealand. Suzuki, to my knowledge, did not create a true factory service manual for this particular model. And what the publisher of this document did, and he does a very nice job, by the way. You can find these on eBay. I have bought other reference materials from him before. They're a little bit pricey, but he does a great job with these. What he did is he went out and pulled together a compilation of different reference material that's related to similar Suzuki engines to the TS50, i.e. the AS50, AC50. He might have even had some other engines mixed in there that have very similar engine designs, and then he created this, essentially his own service manual. So this doesn't relate specifically to the TS50 in terms of service information, but it does reference very similar engines, so I think this will be very usable for my purposes. Speaking of service manuals, my advice to anyone that's newly contemplating rebuilding or getting into the details of a Japanese engine such as this TS50, don't even think about doing it without a service manual. I've been working on these bikes for over 50 years, seriously, since I was just a kid. I've been tearing apart Japanese motorcycle engines. And even to this day, I don't touch an engine, I don't touch a project without first going out and buying. That's the very first thing I do is go out and buy a service manual or what I can find in terms of service information. Even with all my years of experience, first thing you should do, go buy yourself a service manual. I deal with questions from time to time with people that get themselves into something and they get confused, they don't know what to do, they forgot how they took it apart, they didn't take photos, and then they come to me looking for advice on how to address their concerns or their issues. A lot of that can be avoided by using the proper service material, service manual. And both factory service manuals as well as aftermarket such as Climber, perfectly fine. Go out and find what you can out on eBay or other sources on the internet, and that's a great first step. What we're going to do now is I have the engines set up over on my bike stand, my bike lift, motorcycle lift. I used engines. Yes, it's plural. I have 2 engines for this project. One is the original engine I bought, or the original engine that came with the bike, rather. And then I bought a second engine, essentially a parts motor, because I needed the cylinder and the cylinder head. And we've talked about that in previous videos in this series already. If you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, you can go back and reference those. And I will touch on that a little bit more here in a moment. But I have the engines laid out on the bike lift, and we're going to go around and we're going to talk in a little more detail about my thinking and my next steps. There are the engines for the project. The one over here on the right, that's the original engine that came in the frame when I bought the project. The one in the middle, or the engine here that's in the middle of this setup, is the spare parts engine. And the only reason, again, to remind those of you that watched earlier, the only reason I bought that engine initially was to get the cylinder and head, which are right over here, to get the cylinder and head, because that engine has terrible piston slap, and it had already been bored as far out as you could go with it. So short of putting a new liner in it, I had to find a new cylinder, and the only cylinder I could find, and believe me, I looked all over for some time, the only cylinder I could find was on this engine that came out of the state of Wisconsin. So I had to buy the whole engine, which actually wasn't that expensive, believe it or not. Plus it gives me spare parts if I should need anything. I don't think I will, but we'll see. You never know when you get inside of these engines. The original engine here on the right does run. You've seen it run in the previous videos. Again, if you haven't seen that series of videos of me first presenting the project to you back quite a number of months ago now, go back and watch it, because this engine does run, again, with serious engine noise and piston slap. This engine appears to be locked up. I can't turn the crank over, at least as it sits right now. Once I get it, if I was to take it apart, might be able to get it to free up. Don't know, but at this point, it's really a bit irrelevant for me. That's not of terrible importance to me, whether this engine turns over or not. That one is the one we're going to rebuild, the one on the right, the original for this frame. Over here, again, I did a series of videos on this as well, and that is boring that cylinder out. That was an original bore, so I went first over, and here you can see let me turn the camera just a little bit for you. And here you can see the piston right there and rings, the new piston and rings that go with that new bore, and that simply is the box that those parts came in. I also wanted the cylinder head, because the original cylinder head over here has a helicoil in it, or an insert, which wasn't done very well either, and it seems to be a little loose, and I didn't want to have to mess around with taking it out and trying to figure out a way to fix that. So I got a twofer over here. I got the cylinder and the cylinder head that does not have a helicoil for the spark plug hole. That's what we're talking about here when we talk about helicoil, which is an insert to repair damaged threads. There's a number of brands and designs of inserts. Helicoil is a brand name. It's one of the oldest. It's been around for decades. I think it might even go back to World War II. I couldn't swear to it without doing research, but they've been around forever. They're still used commonly, but I believe there are better solutions today than helicoil if one has to replace a thread or repair a thread with an insert. But nonetheless, that has a helicoil repair. That one doesn't, so I'm going to go with that head and that cylinder, new piston rings on that engine. I did look over the engines quite carefully in some detail, and there are really no differences between them in terms of engineering changes that I could see readily. There are some differences in terms of parts that are missing. For instance, on the original engine right here, the cover, there's a little, I think it's chrome cover, holds down over the top of the carburetor, which fits behind this right engine cover here. That's a rotary valve engine, and you can see on this engine right over here that little cover is still there. This parts engine, you can see the boot right here for the wiring harness. The original engine, that boot's missing, And there are probably some other differences too. The carburetor for this engine I have off right now. I've got that set aside. The original carburetor that did come with it, obviously, because the engine ran. This engine, this parts engine, did not come with a carburetor. So my intention is to start with, obviously, the original engine. What I will do is I will get it up on the bench, the workbench, which is right behind where we're shooting right now, with the overhead camera, and we'll begin the disassembly and the breakdown of that engine. Now, I have cleaned that engine when I first got it out of the frame. I did a quick cleanup of the engine and get all the grease and grime and crud off it, because those engines seem to always be filthy dirty. This parts engine came already cleaned. They were kind enough to clean it, and they drained the oil out of it when they shipped it. Of course, I did have to drain the oil out of this one, which I think I depicted or showed in one of my breakdown videos I did some time ago. So this engine is really ready to go. It's got a rough cleaning. It's not near as clean as it needs to be before it's over. But we'll start with pulling the head, the cylinder, the engine side covers off of each side, and gradually kind of working our way down into the core of the engine. Get the rotor valve cover off, which is back behind here. I do have to do a little research to determine which parts are available for the engine and which aren't, such as bearings and seals. I usually do that before I start the teardown, so I have a perspective on where I might have trouble if I need to source new parts. I'm guessing, and that's all it is right now, most of the bearings and seals for this little engine are probably still available out there somewhere. Perhaps even still from Suzuki. I don't know. But I will do that research before I get too far into the engine, so I know what my parts situation might end up being before it's all over. I think that's going to be it for this video today, folks. I realize this is probably a little shorter than usual as well. The last couple of videos or so I think I've shot have been a little shorter. I don't want to break into this video at this point and start breaking the engine down. I think I'll just start a fresh video with the disassembly of that engine up on the workbench. So that's a little overview of the project coming up. Again, it's going to be over a period of weeks. I'm sure at least probably 3, 4, 5 videos, if we don't even get up into the 7, 8, 10 count of videos before it's all over. We'll have to see. Any issues, questions, thoughts, drop me a note. Otherwise, as usual, thanks for watching.